There we go, Mike. Good morning, and welcome to this joint meeting of the Baltimore Metropolitan Council and the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board. This meeting comes at a critical time for our region. We have all been impacted by the collapse of the Key Bridge. In our meeting today, we'll touch on the recovery in a number of ways. Our hearts go out to the communities around the bridge and to the families of those who lost their lives in this accident. Mr. Mayor and County Executive Olszewski, please know that you have our full support as we all work towards recovery. We have a very full agenda this morning. Our first item of business is an update on the Key Bridge recovery efforts from Commander Baxter Smoke of the United States Coast Guard.
You ready?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Baxter Smoke, United States Coast Guard. I'm the Prevention Department Head at Sector Maryland National Capital Region, so I'm here in the local area. After following the incident, I fell into a new role, which is the Operations Section Chief for the Unified Command's response to the Key Bridge collapse. So everything from search and rescue to recovery, to salvage, to enforcement of safety zones, all of those operations that are critical to this massive response all under my and so to offer an update, I know I spoke to not all of you last time, but the Coast Guard, along with our partners in the Unified Command, we're well aware that we're still missing 2 individuals as we continue our operations. If additional remains are identified, stop salvage operation, mobilize resources that will stand by. Not a day goes by that we're not thinking about those individuals. And then secondly, keenly focused on the impact that this is having on the port, on the community, as well as the national impact to supply chain and the national economy. As far as an update of where we stand on salvage, as of this morning, 120 containers have been removed from the Dolly. We responded to numerous debris reports from our debris hotline. We're nearing 100 there. Those are pieces that have, from bridge fendering systems that get outside of the immediate salvage that respond to cover. The vessel remains fully boomed in case there is.
Oh yeah, Blake knows how to do that.
From the containers or something from the vessel itself. We have not seen any sheeting or pollution since the very beginning of this incident. And that pollution was sheeting from some of the equipment that was crushed from the road that came down. Still positioned to respond to any. As I'm sure you can appreciate, as the salvage efforts expand, risk expands for pollution, people that want to come into the zone and see what's happening. So all of those operations are closely connected and integrated. All 3 salvage companies, and just for everyone's awareness, I think you tell just by optically what you see that it's a complex salvage operation, but we have 3 salvage contractors that we're managing simultaneously. Resolve Marine is focused on the vessel. Don John Salvage is focused on the main ship panel, working with the Army Corps, and then Skanska, another contractor, is focused on the state waters. All of that is happening simultaneously, but from a prioritization standpoint, the main ship channel and restoring access to the port remains our #1 priority. Obviously, safety is number one priority, but that goes out without saying. Operational objectives, getting commerce back to work, as much as we can, as soon as we can. I think everybody's aware that we have 2 alternate channels currently operating. We've had approximately 100 commercial vessels use those channels. And allow wreck vessels to come through for the first time. That's expanding this week for additional wreck vessels. On the immediate horizon, we're looking at, I can't give a date, but very, very soon, a 20-foot deep channel that will be to the northeast of the main span. So outside of the main channel, the targeted community there is deeper draft military vessels, but more importantly, deeper draft tug and barges. There are a few port entities that, well, all port entities need commerce, but there's a few that could get some relief if we could get to that's on the immediate horizon. Work is ongoing today to finalize those surveys. And then the next logical step is what the Army Corps is calling a 280 by 35 foot section of the main ship channel that we will open to limited capacity in operations. It's hard to say like we've removed X% of debris and wreckage because not every ton requires an equivalent level of work. There could be a massive piece that's a lot of weight that accounts for a large portion of that, but there may be a smaller piece that is technically more difficult. So it's hard to give you a percentage, but what I can say is that we are on track to have a limited access channel in addition to the 20-foot channel, the 35-foot draft channel by the end. So it's right around the corner. A lot of work is going into that. We're already planning vessel prioritization. I have a meeting, the Captain Report and I have a meeting today with industry stakeholders. So that's everybody from terminal operators to shipping lines to cargo brokers, ship agents, all of those folks. We're meeting at 2 o'clock today to ensure that vessel prioritization happens in a systematic and thoughtful way. We have plans on how to do that, but those plans are only plans. We need to validate them with our customer base, which stretches from local to national implication, economic implications. Getting that prioritization right is extremely important and a focus of ours. So we hope to get some more granularity on that today after what I intend to convey to them. I will convey to you all that 35-foot by 280-foot portion of the main ship channel. I want to emphasize that it is limited access. This is not reopening the port in that area. The dolly is still there. There's still wreckage there outside of the space that's been cleared that needs to continue in order to get to the end of May deadline of full reopening. What we don't want to do is allow some limited traffic that then offsets us from that timeline. So we have to be strategic and with what we're letting in and how we're letting it in and when we're letting it in, particularly until the dolly is moved. Even though the channel is likely to be 300 feet wide and maybe even deeper than 35, 2 vessels that transit of that, or a vessel that transit of substantial tonnage, which we need economically, will have a direct impact on the safety and stability of the dolly. When 2 vessels pass, there is an extreme amount of force there, because of the amount of water moving through. So just because a ship looks like it fits in that 35 by 300 doesn't mean that it's safe to move through. And so having our elected officials and our industry understand that, and then team with us on prioritizing what we can move through. So that's where we are. Short term, 20-foot channel, that will remain a viable avenue, even if the 35-foot channel is temporarily closed for high risk salvage operations. That channel is going to be open for some daylight transits, and then we expect it to remain open in evening hours and move traffic through while consequential salvage operations are not. The challenge is mobilizing and demobilizing assets for the salvage operation, which we have to do in order to let traffic through, does take away from the time that they're actually working to get to the ultimate goal. So I'll pause there for any questions. I feel like I'm talking to you guys too. Yes, please.
Just real quick, first, something so horrific to really for actions of the city and those emergencies. Those lost. Memories will always be of us. On a more objective side, two questions. The task force commander of this, is it Coast Guard lead on this? Or?
So there is no lead. It's a unified command. So the Coast Guard, the Army Corps, the 3 state entities, and then the vessel itself all have authorities and resources, and the decisions are made across that group.
So when you're referring to a unified command, you're referring to a collective, not an actual unified individual.
It is. There are incidents in which the Coast Guard responds where we may be the sole authority, and there would be an incident commander. Here there is several incident commanders that share authority and act as a unified command. And so I think like a board of directors, right? They're in that command post all day, every day, making decisions as a single entity, but with their perspectives and their range of regulatory authorities. That's the challenge with these things. It's not easy to make it work. We've been very successful in integrating really well. A lot of that comes from the leadership above the unified command, from President Biden to the governor to Mayor Scott, and then the flag, the admirals and the generals, and that ultimately are above some of those folks in the unified command, but don't have the authority. There's been a lot of leadership there to help that cohesion, and typically a unified command is maybe 3 entities. If I'm sure you all remember the Ever Forward incident, we had a unified command there, but it was Coast Guard, state, and vessel. Right. This is Coast Guard, Corps, 3 entities of the state, the vessel, and then a plethora of other interested agencies.
Thanks. Yes. First off, Commander, thank you for all of your work and the work you've done through the Unified Command. It's been, remarkable, that outreach and the just influx of support. On this Unified Command, on the channel access point, Is that the same issue? So the unified command will also determine the prioritization of which vessels can get through, or will that be the Coast Guard that has a determination of prioritization on that?
So the Coast Guard is ultimately the one that makes that decision. However, because of the complexities of this, that cannot be made in a bubble. And so salver, the salvers as well as the Corps all have to be a part of that decision. So while the Coast Guard might be able to unilaterally make that decision, it won't be, it will be coordinated.
And so the 35-foot channel, when it is open, ideally at the end, as soon as practicable, that who and when and what can go through that will be Coast Guard with the input of others.
All of the vessel traffic management, that will be managed by the Unified Command.
Okay.
Underneath the Unified Command within operations, we have a Marine Transportation System Recovery Branch. And within that, all the vessel even all the stuff that's moving now is being run through them. So they know exactly what operations are happening, when it's safe to move vessels. And that's those, even the alternate channels right now are open. However, this morning, we're not moving traffic through them because of a dive operation that's occurring. And so we're just metering that traffic. We are open, but it's controlled movements. And that MTSRB is working directly with the vessels and the agents for all those movements. That will be the same model that we follow for the 20-foot channel, the 35-foot channel. The safety zone is still there. So it's not really open unless you're authorized to transit through.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Very well. Well, Commander Smoke, thank you very much for your input this morning. I want to thank you. You've been working around the clock with your team, and we truly do appreciate that. And wish you all the best and all the safe.
We could not do it. The Unified Command, I'm not speaking for the Coast Guard, all of the entities that are involved in this could not do it without the support that we've had from our elected officials and the general public broader. So thank you. And we'll keep working hard every day until we're back to some semblance of normalcy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our January 26th meeting minutes. Approval of the January 26th meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve? Second, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The minutes are approved. Now we're going to go to the next item is the approval of our FY25 budget. Everyone has a copy of the proposed budget in your meeting packet. Mike Kelly is available to answer any questions on this year's budget. Anyone have any questions? Very well. So is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Now comes the time where we're going to hear from our Executive Director, Mike Kelly, and from Don Halligan of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission, and from Fareed Emmerich, Chair of the Urban Area Security Initiative. Mike?
Thank you, Commissioner. Some quick updates on BMC in general. Our Chesapeake Connect trip is set for St. Louis, Missouri this year. As everybody knows, there's a lot of great comps between Baltimore and St. Louis, not the least of which is that it's the only other really major metro in the country where the city is totally separate from the county. They're separate entities. I think there's a lot to learn. I had the opportunity to travel out there with County Executive Olszewski and his team to a trip to St. Louis County last fall. And I think there's some real opportunities for us to learn and explore that area this fall. So the dates are set. We will also soon be announcing a date for a Spring Chesapeake Connect reunion event. More details on that to come. That'll be hosted in partnership with the University of Maryland Medical System. And we will get our invitations out in June. So please start considering who you'd like to nominate from your jurisdictions to join us. Very brief project committee updates. Our purchasing group, BRTB, the Baltimore Regional Cooperative Purchasing Committee, which is our worst acronym, had a great public safety and emergency expo at the airport about a month ago. They brought in vendors who sell all sorts of 911 and emergency equipment. It was attended by over 300 people. And my understanding is a number of potential regional contracts are moving forward from that. We are in the process now on the housing front of updating our 2020 analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. This is a federal document that gets updated every 4 years. We've hired a consultant and the 24 update is now getting underway. And then lastly, the first step of our climate pollution reduction grant was submitted this spring. This is a $1 million grant from EPA that went to regions around the country to develop strategies for carbon reduction, really. The first step is the submission of our priority climate action plan. The final climate action plan will be released next year. Each of your jurisdictions is participating, and we're very happy to have the support we've gotten on this so far. Bike to Work Week is coming up from May 13th to May 19th. This is an annual event that BMC helps coordinate among the jurisdictions, just flagging that. Get your miles in now so everybody looks good in their spandex and bike shorts when that time comes around. And then I wanted to share quickly some analysis that we've done on the Key Bridge response. BMC is doing what we can to play a coordinating role between the state and local agencies, especially on the transportation front. We've done community level analysis at impacted zip codes in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and Anne Arundel County. This will be available soon on our website for everyone. And we have hard copies of briefing memos to share with our board members. Doing this at the zip code level is not ideal, but that's the geography that we have this data at. We have population, demographic data, income data on each of these zip codes, just to get a better understanding of who's going to be most directly affected by this in the short term. We also have the number of jobs. You can see the Highlandtown zip code, which for anyone who knows anything about Baltimore isn't really Highlandtown. It goes from Highlandtown all the way out to Dundalk. That's where the bulk of the jobs are. That's where a lot of our analysis is focused on the economic front. We also have great information on the poverty levels. You'll see that this is actually some environmental justice analysis. And in general, the impacted area has a slightly higher poverty level than the region at large, and a much higher level of individuals who are below 200% of the poverty threshold. So this is a community that's going to need significant financial support as we all get through this. In terms of traffic, on the left is our southbound traffic, and on the right is our northbound traffic of what existed over the Key Bridge. You can see that 2/3 of it, the blue, was non-work-related traffic. So of the 18,000 average trips a day, which would be higher on some days, a little lower on the weekends, 2/3 of this was people just using the bridge for their daily lives. And 1/3 was directly related to business. We've also tracked commuter impact, and this is a typical commute from Dundalk to Ferndale. Prior to the collapse, that commute would take 20 minutes. Post-collapse, that commute is up to 41 minutes. And for the individuals who really did need to use the bridge for school, for daycare, for work, you're looking at a major, major disruption. And I know that's something our philanthropy and our governments are considering, but that's one of the things we've been able to start tracking.
Is that each way? 40, 20, doubling each way?
It is essentially a doubling each way. Yeah, that particular trip was north to south, but it's just as long to go around the other way. In terms of origins, this slide shows let's see here if I can show you some of the actual data. This slide shows us the origin from the north side going south of where people would largely come from. And it's a lot of folks in that Dundalk area. Conversely, this is where people from the north side would end up on their daily commutes. And you'll see it's not only the Fairfield terminal on the south, but also the areas around BWI Airport. And BWI Airport has consistently had challenges getting workers to work on time. This is going to exacerbate that for businesses in that community. Going north, a significant number of the commuters actually came from Anne Arundel County. And you can see, not surprisingly, the major destination was the Port of Baltimore for northbound commuters. That's really a snapshot of the analysis. There's a lot more detail. I'll make sure we share what we have individually. And if folks have questions or things they would like us to research, please reach out. We have a sort of tremendous capacity for developing this sort of information, and we're more than happy to share it as needed. Any questions on this before we move
What
on?
about hazmat traffic? And is impacted because that was the only way to get from, north, south, south, north was the bridge. I mean, now they have to go around, right? I mean, is that,
Go around or find other routes. And so there were roughly 1,200, I believe, hazmat passages per day on the bridge.
Yeah.
The obvious solution is to go around the west side of the Beltway, which is 20 miles longer. But I know Commissioner Moran and our friends on the Eastern Shore are also tracking how much of that hazmat traffic may end up getting diverted up and down the Eastern Shore. And that's the kind of thing we can model initially. I think we'll really know in a month or two how that's going to shake out, especially once the port is operational again. I don't have at my fingertips the number of hazardous materials that were generated by the port, but it can't be insignificant. And so we'll have to see where those trips end up going. And I know Secretary Wiedefeld is going to speak during the BRTB section, may have more information on that.
It's also wide or high loads as well. It's not just the hazardous materials.
right?
But to your point, Mike, we're not seeing then we're likely not seeing the full impact on traffic yet. Once the port is operational again, we're gonna see additional impacts beyond what we're already experiencing.
Yeah, in the tunnels especially. And right now we're seeing 15 to 20 minute delays beyond normal at the tunnels. Or 15 to 20 minute additions, not necessarily a delay, but in addition to a commute. And some of that will increase when the port reopens. And then commuters are going to find other ways to travel as well, which is a whole other issue. It may relieve some of the traffic in the bridges, but at the neighborhood level, we're going to have to be vigilant to make sure that we are not diverting too much traffic through communities that may already be struggling.
I think, Mike, we know this. We know that's going to happen. I just came through the tunnel and there was truck traffic, and I was sitting for like 10 minutes in the tunnel. We just have to be. I think that we have to our due diligence. I don't know if there's any way for us to predict, like, with the amount of traffic, and do some kind of visualization that shows like where they're most likely to go, so that we can start to work on that now. Because Johnny's point is coming, once the port opens back up. If we get the full channel open at the end of May, we know it's coming kind of quick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's exactly what we're trying to work on. And we've expanded our capacity. We have a number of companies we work with to track data. We've expanded our capacity to track cell phone data, which is probably the best way to see how people are traveling. And we'll do everything we can to coordinate with the locals and MDOT to try and help however possible. There's no additional questions. I want to introduce Pri Emmerich, the chair of our Urban Area Security Initiative. That's the group of first responders who BMC helps to coordinate, to talk a little bit about the UASI's role in this and some of the challenges the UASI is facing moving forward. Preeti?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Good morning. My name is Preeti Emmerich. As Mike has said, I am the chair of the Baltimore UASI group, but also I am the director of the Anne Arundel County Office of Emergency Management. And I'm here to talk today about a very important initiative in terms of our funding resources. And I know we had heard an update about the collapse of the bridge, and it all ties in together. So I will get started. Baltimore area UASI funding concerns. So just a little bit about the history of the UASI is the Urban Area Security Initiative. And this initiative was created after the attacks of 9/11 and 2003. And initially there were 29 UASI areas. And these are areas of high population density that are recognized as potential targets. In the height of this, 2010, there were 61 UASIs that were funded, and now there are 39. And the Baltimore UASI region was one of the original regions to be funded. And why is this important? Why is this regional asset important? When the bridge collapsed, within the first 2 hours, there were first responders on the scene and they were local first responders. All disasters are local. And so you have a listing of the jurisdictions that had assets there almost immediately. And also there were counties, jurisdictions that had assets on standby. So you have to remember that when this incident first occurred, locals were on the scene first. And you can see it's a good assortment of resources, of personnel. We talked about unified command, which is tricky. There is the incident management team, which is made up of locals that initially assumed command of the situation. So our UASI funding is grant funding that comes from the federal government. And you can see some of these assets that were in the initial response to the incident were funded or partially funded by grant funding. And it's a lot. And so we really rely on this grant funding to protect our citizens, protect our residents, to make sure that those life safety priorities are met in the first critical hours of an incident.
Is the funding in red or black?
I'm sorry, yes, it's in red. So the grant funding is in red. So measuring risk. So the UASI groups were created because highly density populations were considered a potential target. And so how does the federal government measure that risk? So in terms of the 100 most populous MSAs in the United States, you can see this nice complicated chart. I'm sure others online can see it too, of how they consider that risk is measured. But that's a caveat that we have to talk about here. Because in FY24, our region's risk rating increased from ranking from the 27th to the 22nd. However, our funding was cut, 3.8 million to 2.4 million. And that's a lot of funding that's cut from the local first responders, emergency management, the ones, again, that respond to these disasters. So does risk really play a role in how this funding is created, the amount that is set, and how it's divided among the regions? And why does it matter? Because in the recent years, we have seen the compounding risk. And you could read here, I don't have to go through it, but severe natural disasters, incidents where there's flooding, there's tornadoes, there is a bridge collapse, critical infrastructure, there's increasing population. There's things that as increasing technology and complexities of what has happened, we have to be able to respond. And that funding helps us respond. And if there's a decrease in that funding, that affects regionally, locally, even the state, how we can respond. We're talking about special events, cyber attacks. And there's an increased vulnerability. The Baltimore region houses so many entities that are vulnerable. The state capitol, the Naval Academy, various military installations, and critical infrastructure. And sometimes it is too late to recognize when that critical infrastructure goes down. And we saw it with the bridge, right? Statewide, nationwide impacts. Let's not realize this until it's too late. And then we say, wait a minute, we need to protect our infrastructure. We need to get more funding. So just a quick snapshot of the Baltimore area UASI funding throughout the years. You can see that since basically 2015, it's been level funding. And that has not accounted for the additional cost of living, inflation, supplies, the increased complexity of our disasters that are happening in this region. And we have to do something about this. So this is a quick comparison of the other UASI regions. As you can see, the funding is variable, right? Baltimore USC region is in yellow, and you can see it's basically steady funding, while the other regions are up and down. Is this all due to the risk factors that the federal government is assessing? Or is there another matter at play? So we talk about the resources that this grant funding is used for. And in the previous slide, when we talked about the bridge collapse and the initial response, there was a lot of resources and personnel, right? These are life safety equipment that law enforcement uses, that fire uses. The personnel, they're emergency management personnel that come from the localities. And this is what the funding goes towards. And in the field of emergency management, our field has grown so much just because of the complexities of disasters. But the funding has not matched that. And as you can see, normal emergency management activities and additional emergency management activities, we are battling things such as extreme temperature, food insecurity. We have an opioid crisis. We have special events, election security, cybersecurity. Society's gotten more complex, our incidents has gotten more complex. Since COVID, the gaps have increased in what our population can meet. And we have to be able to maintain and meet those challenges. The funding challenges. We have a lot of gaps in this region. It just happens, there's nothing unusual about that. There's gaps throughout this nation that we are trying to meet. And so the funding challenge is that while we have these gaps that the funding is supposed to be used to meet, 30% of it is allocated to other priorities that the federal government determines. There's not a lot of flexibility to be able to use that money in order to meet the local challenges specific to our region. Not only that, 20% goes to the state for administrative duties. Also, 35% automatically goes to law enforcement. Emergency management, we use a lot of this money to fund our personnel. So again, the people that go out there and are able to respond in those immediate hours, it's mainly funded with grant funding. And we are losing that grant funding. So 50% goes to the personnel, for personnel, and that's the maximum that we could use to fund many of the agencies that are in your locality. Why isn't the current funding enough? Our risk rating went up, and it didn't matter because we took an 11% cut this year. So clearly it is not based on risk. There is something else going on. So how do we meet that? We are struggling. Emergency management is struggling, police is struggling, fire is struggling, all public safety areas are struggling. And I know you know that in terms of what the county budgets, the other jurisdictions, money is limited. And we want to make sure that our voice is loud and clear when we go to the federal government and say, this region needs money, our emergency responders need money, and we are at risk. There has been no increase in terms of meeting the needs of salaries, of the resources, and of the cost increase. And again, we have to consider the planning, organizing, equipping, training, and exercising that goes on each and every single day in the case of a bridge collapse, in the case of a hurricane. This is the time to start advocating for ourselves. And it's not just the Baltimore USC region. We work with a lot of jurisdictions. The bridge that connects Anne Arundel County, Queen Anne's County. We have to make sure to coordinate with you and have those resources as well. We also have a turnover rate in terms of emergency management, and I know in other professions, and it's really because we depend on this grant funding. I know personally my office has lost 3 personnel to the National Capital Region because they pay more, because I can't increase my grant funding in order to meet the needs of highly qualified personnel to help us. So why am I here today? We know that the risk factor isn't really a factor when the federal government determines the grant funding. And what we are asking is for your help in advocating in order to increase our grant funding to what we had in FY15, which is $5.25 million. Would I love to ask for tens and 20 and millions of dollars? Absolutely. But we're being realistic. If we get to a $5.25 million, we can replace a lot of the regional assets you saw that are outdated, that need replacing in 5 years, that maintain our personnel so that we can move forward. So the action items that I am asking is that the Baltimore UASC group does have a letter prepared that we would love your signatures on, that will go to our federal representatives to help advocate for this region. And Mike, I know we'll send the letter out, but that is our ask for now to get to this 5.25 million. Will it solve all the problems? No, but this is the first step in order to increase the safety of our region. That is all I have. Thank you for your attention. If there's follow-up information that's needed for the technicality of the grants, I do want to thank Erin Harris, the program manager for our Baltimore UASC group, for a lot of the data that went into this. Thank you, and happy to take any questions now if we have time. That was both at the same time. That was impressive.
Thank you. Which federal agency makes the allocation determinations for particular UASCs? Is it FEMA or?
DHS and FEMA is under DHS at this point.
So, you know, the importance of what you're doing. I think how, you know, on 9/11, and there were so many instances around the country where this guy here was doing good stuff, you couldn't talk to this guy here doing good stuff, so people died because you couldn't communicate. And we just had an incident where a bay pilot on a ship in the middle of the harbor somehow was able to communicate effectively that message to a police officer on a road in another jurisdiction and stop the cars, and that avoided massive loss of life, right? First, as soon as I heard with that, I was like, oh my God, it worked, okay?
Yes.
So I just leave that up front, yeah, that's great stuff. And then I look at the UASC assets you put up here with the UASC assets, the red, the folks in red on your slide 22, that these folks out in the, you know, that's a lot, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 jurisdictions, we're all rolling. I mean, I know these were within minutes, where these red units were on the highway and heading down, that only exists because of this fund, right? And they're skilled, they're the folks that were hanging out the doors of the helicopters and on the boats and all that were put in place for this. So I really appreciate the importance of this and the success that we've had. I am just a little, let's go for more funding, but I hope that we can keep recognize that, yeah, the world's more complex, but maybe we also have to keep our eyes on the prize here and what's important. And these fundamental things like having these dive teams, these swift boats, the helicopters, communications, it's all very expensive to set up, to maintain, to train. It's not just to invest and it's gone and to keep these folks. We just finished up a 2-day Peach Bottom melted down exercise out in Hartford County with FEMA and MEMA and a lot of the state agencies in this room. And it was an expensive exercise to bring all those people in, and to keep that level of preparedness is expensive. But I'm looking on slide 27, and the stuff on the left hand is all exactly what we started out to do. You need to be careful. The stuff on the right that's important stuff in life, but it doesn't really belong on this. I think we gotta be careful what we're, mission creep here. I'm concerned because the things that you put in place and what we're doing through UASC are really, really important. That it's you had a slide here. It's not when, it's not if, it's when, and which I totally agree with. I just, if you have an unlimited amount of federal fund, let your mission creep as far as you want. But I am concerned that we have the money available to hit these fundamental things like communications and training, equipping, resources, and some of the stuff on slide 27. I just would submit that I'm just struggling how that's not outside of the mission that I see as a county leader for what I would like to make sure that we maintain for things like a Bridge collapse, or I'm sorry, Key Bridge collapse. I hope it's Jig said he said. So we've got a lot of stuff out there we're doing. I just had a team. My EMS is now coordinating a team to work with Aberdeen Proving Ground, or Edgewood Arsenal side of Aberdeen Proving Ground, on fielding a team that would be able to be an asset for biochem reaction.
because they don't have the force, they have the training, the equipment and all that. They don't have the force that's there all the time. So, and these are expensive for us to do, and to be able to put those people in there. But, to have that kind of a force just a few miles from the nation's capital, really by air, to be able to react, and you get 30 or 40 people who can form that key nucleus, but that's gonna cost more money, but it's a real risk, these terrorist threats. So anyway, I just hope that we be cautious. If you get more money, fine, but if we're not getting more money, the left side up there, from the UASC standpoint, ought to be our focus. Thank you.
No, and I appreciate that. I will point out that emergency management is an all hazards program. So no matter what comes in terms of what disaster or incident might happen, both sides of the terroristic physical security also intermingles with what I call the health and human services. And I think with COVID, we understood that where there's an emergency, there are those effects that happen in the recovery. And that's what we also should be aware of. And it's not one prioritization over the other, it's the whole community approach, the intermingling of several issues that come about. And so when we talk about the warming and cooling centers, it's not the everyday programs that are run by our health and human services agencies. It's what we experienced last summer that caused many counties in this room to activate their emergency operations center because there was a great concern for human life. And the protection of that human life also falls within the all hazards approach. So I do appreciate the conversation about the mission creep, but I just also want to emphasize the all hazards approach and that not one is going to take the place of the other. I will say just kudos to Baltimore City when I talk about local response, the communications and the 911 and how that was all communicated. That's saved lives, right? But that's something that on Blue Skies Day, that's what we practice all the time, right? And we say, I don't want to jinx the Bay Bridge. We actually had an exercise scenario just last year about a collapse of the Bay Bridge. It's something that's always on our mind. We don't want it to happen, but we're going to be prepared when it does. Any other questions?
Thank you for doing Anne Arundel proud.
Yeah.
And you too can hire a Pretty Emmerich if we increase the funding. She'll come at budget request time. It'd be very.
Yeah, absolutely. Always fighting for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Preeti. Our next presentation is an update on the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission. This is the new commission that was created last year by the legislature by then delegate, board member Bridges, and now Assistant Secretary Bridges. Don Halligan is our staff director of this program, and Don's going to provide an update on BRTs.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning. I believe everyone on the board is aware of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission and how it was formed and why it was created. So I'm going to be brief here. And I wanted to provide you with a brief update on the BRTC and who began meeting in February. They've met twice now, actually, once in February and once in March. They're set to meet again in May. They've begun to organize themselves. They've elected a chair, John Larry from Baltimore City. And they're expected to elect a vice chair at their upcoming meeting in May. Here's a list of the current membership. And I'm hopeful that they reach out to you and discuss and are able to discuss transit issues as we move forward. As an entity, the BRTC is going to serve a crucial role for reviewing and commenting on various documents related to the MTA and MDOT. They're going to review the locally operated transit systems, plans and services to ensure coordination among the lot systems and the locally operated transit systems and the MTA system. They are routinely accept public comment throughout the process, and we've received some. And at the end of the year, they're gonna produce a report with some finding and some recommendations that I hope you'll pay attention to. Their upcoming work program is here. And as mentioned, they hope to elect a vice chair. They're really getting their sea legs underneath them to try and understand the issues that are facing transit in the region and the challenges, and want to develop some of these recommendations by year end. And I just, again, wanted to give you a brief update of where we are and what we've been up to so far. Any questions? Thank you.
Very good. So the next meeting of the Baltimore Metropolitan Council will be on Friday, July 19th, 2024. And this meeting will be virtual. So we are going to move right into the BRTB portion of this morning's agenda.
So this is a quick gavel in, gavel out.
That's it. Meeting Transportation Board. Today we have 6 action items that we will consider together, and then we will ask MDOT Secretary Whitfield to give us an update on the Francis Scott Key Bridge. So the first consideration is, well, we're going to now move into the action items. Todd Lang, please introduce the 6 resolutions. We will then ask for a single motion and a second to approve. We will then field questions from the BRTB members and then the public before proceeding to a single vote on all the resolutions. Todd, please proceed.
Thank you, Board. Today, as Commissioner Moran had mentioned, we are going to be handling 6 different resolutions. I'm going to go through all of them at once. We are going to go through a single vote after we have public comment on all 6 of these resolutions. 2 of these resolutions previously were scheduled for the meeting we had to cancel, which was the morning of the bridge collapse. So we do need to get those through. We appreciate Federal Highway Administration's flexibility considering the extenuating circumstances of that day and our lateness in approving one of these different resolutions. Well, let me go through these. First one is resolution 24-17. This is the I-70 Maryland 32 to I-60 695 TISMO project. This is a transportation systems management and operation project. It's supposed to improve safety and operations along the I-70 corridor. The project previously had also included some segments along US 29 and US 40. Those are going to be broken out in terms of separate SHA district projects. This resolution itself approves $3.5 million in design funds. It also then removes the right-of-way and construction funding until the project definition is formalized, and hopefully we get some sort of revenue increase to be able to handle these additional projects. Moving on to resolution 24-18. This is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI project. This is designed to create a network of vehicle charging stations along Maryland's designated alternate fuel corridors. It includes about $900,000 in design funds and $21.4 million in construction funds. This includes private funding also coming from a contractor in the terms of about $4.3 million. The construction is anticipated to begin in fall of 2024 and extend through the fall of 2030. Moving on to resolution 24-19. This is the adoption of our fiscal year 2025 annual work program for the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board. The budget for fiscal year 2025 is approximately $10.6 million. This includes about $6.9 million of EMC staff money. Includes local jurisdiction activities of about $480,000, and then consultant activities about $3.2 million. We did have a 30-day public review on our annual work program. There was a lot of support for bicycle, pedestrian, transit, and safety planning as part of that program. Briefly, I'm not going to go through all of the different highlights of the different work programs that we're planning on doing in fiscal year 2025, but one of those is staff support for local discretionary grants. A lot of the money that is coming through the new bipartisan infrastructure bill is local discretionary programs. We know that both our local jurisdictions and the state are somewhat overwhelmed in terms of not only processing all the applications, but then also help in supporting kind of managing a lot of these programs. So we here at the MPO are hopefully going to be able to support our local jurisdictions in that program. Another item is trying to wrap up some of the 30% designs of the Patapsco Regional Greenway. Again, this is a greenway that starts all the way up in Sykesville and extends all the way down into Baltimore City. We're doing 30% design plans at the MPO level, and then local jurisdictions in the state are taking those over and moving them forward into design and engineering and construction. Another program we're working with County Engineers Association of Maryland and also State Highway Administration is streamlining the local project development, delivery, and tracking program. Again, this is trying to make sure that we all are starting to work on common platforms, are starting to kind of move these projects through as quickly and as easily as possible by using the same terminology and the same guidance across different programs. Resolution 24-20 is the adoption of the disadvantaged business enterprise goal for fiscal year 2025. We do this every time we adopt a new unified planning work program or annual work program. The BRTB uses the Maryland DOT Secretary's Office process for the goal setting. There's a very intricate process for determining the DBE percentage goal. The recommendation from that program is 26.2% of the consultant activities that are utilized underneath the annual work program. I can say we go beyond that goal. We try to make sure that we always meet and exceed that. And to that point, our last reported billing period that ended in September of 2023 resulted in a DBE participation rate of 40.6%. So we will hopefully again exceed the goal as we try to do all the time. Resolution 24-21 is a adoption into the Transportation Improvement Program of the Baltimore City Raise Grant Program. This is investments along the CityLink Blue and Orange Link routes. This amendment totals about $54.4 million. It's going to enable faster, more reliable transit trips, and it includes accessibility and amenities at different bus stops throughout the corridors. Construction ultimately will take place in the years 2026, concluding in the year 2029. Finally, the last resolution is 4 different amendments from our Maryland Transit Administration. So I'm going to run through those pretty quickly. The first one is the MARC Facilities Amendment. This includes station upgrades, maintenance facility upgrades, and track improvements. It increases the construction cost within our TIP in fiscal year 2024 by $48.16 million. Again, MTA gets the grants, then ultimately programs the exact dollar amount into our TIP program. So this includes preventative maintenance and also make sure that MARC stations are ADA accessible. Next one is the Kirk Bus Facility. This is a project that is pretty close to closeout, but we're shifting funds from previous years to make sure that they're shown in the proper year of obligation. The Kirk Bus Facility has been upgraded. The facility features all new buildings, providing for inside storage of buses and maintenance operations. And ultimately, this facility supports 14 different bus routes operating in Baltimore City and Baltimore County. The Anne Arundel County Low or No Emission Bus Program provides for the purchase of up to 4 new low emission diesel electric hybrid buses as part of a 5-year plan to transition to a zero emission fleet in Anne Arundel County. The total estimated cost for this project is about $2.27 million. Ultimately, all of the vehicles will be delivered by March 31st of 2026. And then finally, the Baltimore Penn Station multimodal improvements. This project is going to include an addition of a full-time dedicated bus lane on Charles Street, new curb extensions, bus stop improvements, real-time signage, and pedestrian and bicycle access improvements. This includes several different funding sources, including a raise grant of about $7.4 million. There was some congressionally designated spending that is being managed as a CRISI grant to the tune of about $6.3 million, and that includes $1 million of private contributions. So the total project itself is roughly $14.6 million, and the construction is anticipated between the years 2027 and 2029. So that's me talking an awful lot about 6 different resolutions, and we are now asking the board to consider all 6 of these resolutions with a single motion, second, and vote, and then we will ask for comments from the board, and then from the public. I will turn it back to Commissioner Moran. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, the motion we're looking for is for resolution 24-17, 24-18, 24-19, 24-20, 24-21, and 24-22. We have a motion to approve.
So moved, all of them.
Thank you. We have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion from the panel? Seeing none, I'm going to turn it back to you, Todd, for the public.
Hey, Mr. Chair, let me look and see if there are any comments in the chat box. Currently, there is no one requesting to speak in the chat box. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on these different resolutions? Seeing none, I will turn it back to the chair. I think we can.
Seeing none, so there's no further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. All right, so the next is an information item. I'd like to welcome MDOT Secretary Paul Wiedefeld, who will update us on the Francis Scott Key Bridge.
So thank you, sir. As you heard from the Coast Guard, Unified Command is doing quite a bit of work. We're an active participant in that, and have been since the first minutes of the event. Setting it up initially at the toll authority facility that we had, and then offering them the cruise terminal to do it. And I do want to just comment, both in terms of the Corps of Engineers, the Coast Guard, the Navy, it's world class, right? We're the best in the world. They're working 24/7, and our team is as well to get it open as quickly as we can. And obviously, find the two really souls. So I'll just hit on some of the port operations since you heard on the salvage part and on the channel opening, just so you do understand, you know, the federal government is responsible for the 50-foot portion of it, 700-foot wide, 50-foot deep, and everything else, the 2 that have been open and the one that hopefully will be open, the 20-foot draft will be open soon, is in the portion of the state controls that we've basically been doing work with them to get it open so we get some movement in there. That's how this has been working. In terms of the port, port is open. We're doing quite a bit of work. We're still particularly taking advantage of Trade Point Atlantic, which is impacted by the bridge. We've been working with companies literally around the globe to, in effect, move some of the facilities, some of the, particularly automobiles that come in traditionally under the bridge that are coming through Trade Point, and then actually physically moving them over to the different portions of Dundalk where they get processed before they go to dealers. So that we don't, you know, we capture as much of that as we can. And so that's what we're continuing to do. It's any opportunities also on the rail side, the same thing. We're getting things that are coming in by ship in New York, Norfolk, that's actually being trained up to us for different things that we do here at the Port of Baltimore. So again, to try to keep as many people employed as we possibly can. And so that's, and then we're obviously preparing for the potential, the 35-foot and then the eventual 50-foot. So there's different things that we're trying, you heard earlier about how they have to prioritize how they use that, given the complexity of that. And there's certain business needs that we have, so we're giving them our input, what those are, to basically make sure that we're getting as much bang for the buck, you know, every time we make a move through there. So that's on the port side, and then we're obviously looking forward to the full opening, and we're working again with global companies of how they start to stage that. As you can imagine, you know, that's how they run their business. They don't want things basically stagnant. So we've got to work very closely with them on the timing of their access to the port. And another sort of subset of that is the cruise business. Right now, they continue to run those cruises. They're running out of Norfolk, but they want to bring them to Baltimore as quickly as they can. So again, that's one of the priorities for us is to get that. Unlike some of the cargo portion of the business, they're much tighter when they have to get in and get out, given how their operations work as they have to get to Bermuda, wherever they got to get to in a certain time frame. So complicated, but we're working through all that to again support particularly labor and business opportunities, both at the port and the people that are surrounding that support it. In terms of traffic, we're doing, you've heard about quite a bit about what BMC. I want to thank them for everything they've done, the great work they've been doing for us and with us. But as you can see, it is changes by day to day. We saw initially some of the impacts of even spring break, and then obviously weather. But really, until we get to full opening, to really understand how this plays out in the region. So we'll continue to monitor, do what we can do in the short term. But at the end of the day, we're going to be into this for years, until we build a new bridge. So we'll have to work through what we can do, particularly to protect communities. Obviously, make sure that we're doing everything to keep any incidents cleared as quickly as we can, to manage the hazmat, wide load, high load, as well as wide load is going to impact traffic actually more than hazmat. Hazmat's generally moves within one lane, but wide loads not. So we're working all that as well. And then the other major effort that we have ongoing is the rebuild effort. And basically at several levels there, we have a lot of process issues, and my partner here to my left at Federal Highway has been fantastic, and USDOT in general. Some of it's in the financial side. Basically, we had if you don't know, that part of I-695 was not truly an interstate. It was part of the National Highway System. And the importance of that is the National Highway System gives us 80% federal money. The interstate system gives you 90%. But we're actually stretching for the 100% that was promised by the president. So we'll continue to do that. So we'll work through that whole process. We'll have to work through any environmental process, clearly, with anything that we build there. We're pursuing what's called a progressive design build versus a design bid build. So in a progressive design build process, basically what you do is you create the contractor brings on the designer as part of their team. Traditionally, we have the designer, and we design it, and then we bid it out. So it's all three of us together. We need the contractor, the designer, and the client, meaning us. And then we work through phases of the delivery of the project. So you make commitments along the way. So just give an example, like the first one will be whatever any other type of demolition has to be done. Right. So we will basically design that. The contractor will give us a price. We'll agree to the design, agree to the price, and then we'll get the notice to do that portion of it. And then keep chipping away at this project. And what that does, it speeds up the whole process. We did the traditional process. So that's all behind the scenes right now. Obviously, we're dealing at the congressional level, White House, and then obviously in the process side, there's a lot of what we're doing. So with that, I'd be glad to take any questions or comments that you do have. I also just wanted to again thank just the tremendous effort we've had from the local jurisdictions. Thank you, Mr. Pittman, for your involvement, and obviously the mayor of Baltimore County. Been fantastic. Delegation, both at Annapolis and at the national level, has been fantastic in streamlining, obviously being sensitive to all the things that we've got to do. But the support has been fantastic. And I think, when you look at these incidents around the world, and particularly around the US, the performance of the Unified Command and this approach is really just tremendous. Think of how far we've come. And if you haven't had the opportunity, I know the Coast Guard does offer the opportunity to physically, and I know since we're local, we see it, but when we brought in people from, for instance, from Congress, when they get out there, you cannot appreciate this by looking at the video until you get out there and see the scale of what we're doing here, just the complexity of it. So just wanted to direct everyone that's been working so hard on that. So thank you.
Any questions for the secretary?
I have one. Will this project, the new Key Bridge, will that have to undergo the full NEPA?
We're working that through now. Traditionally, when you do these types of projects, it does not. Because in effect, everything was there. You went through that process before. But if there's any significant changes, yes, of course. But right now that we don't anticipate that, and under the emergency relief funding that we got, that process gives you more leeway in that area, because in effect it was there. It was disturbed.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Secretary. Appreciate the update. Next is our public participation opportunity. We now offer the public a chance to speak to the board. Mr. Lang, has anyone indicated they would like to speak today?
Mr. Chair, there is no one who signed up to speak from the audience, and currently there is no one requesting to speak in the chat box. So I think we can wrap it up.
Very well. All right, so we don't have anyone that wishes to speak, so hearing none, we're gonna move to close this meeting. Got a motion to close?
I'll move that.
There you go, second. There we go. Thank you very much.